Hello and welcome back to Shelf Centered. This is Bryce, and I talk about all kinds of things like fantasy and science fiction. Those are really all I talk about. Thank you so much for coming back. I know you know the title of this video, and so you're here for that, or you just love me that much. I know, I understand. Thank you. I love you too. I had to talk about, I actually am very excited for House of the Dragon, but at the same time, I just did not like Fire and Blood, and here's why. But here's also why I do think Fire and Blood is going to go quite well. All right, back in January 21st, 2019, I wrote my review for Fire and Blood. And my first line that I still stick by is this. As the old saying goes, show, don't tell. Until you're rich enough and famous enough and anyone will buy any old garbage you throw out there, when you should be writing some other book that people are much more excited to read. The year was the end of 2018. We had an announcement that, and I actually got a review copy because I was blogging at the time of this book, Dangerous Women. You know what's part of Dangerous Women? Well, first of all, George R.R. Martin and Gardner Dozois edited it, but see that garbage sticker here, this fake sticker because it's actually real. It says includes an all-new Game of Thrones novella by George R.R. Martin. That's really what I came to the table for. That's why I immediately opened this up, turned right to it, skipped all the pages to the very end to find A Dance with Dragons. Oh my gosh, that's literally the name of the last book that came out, but we're gonna find an actual historical event. So it's called The Princess and the Queen, or The Blacks and the Greens, and so we already, and very quickly we find out this is essentially an older Dance with Dragons, and so it's exciting to get to know this, and it's like, okay, I've been waiting. I read all the Dunk and Egg novellas, which are just wonderful. I love them all. I think they're all worth it. I've read, actually up to this point, I had not read, and I still haven't read a Dance with Dragons. I know I'm slacking, but I just been putting it off until we actually get more books in the series. I can only reread so many books in my life. So I jumped to it. I'm reading. It's history of the causes, origins, battles, and betrayals of the most tragic bloodletting known as the Dance of the Dragons, as set down by Archmeister Gildane of the Citadel of Old Town, here transcribed by George R.R. Martin. Already, at least we're told it's a Dance with Dragons, but already, if you aren't bored by now, I don't know. I was already bored by this point. And that's the thing. Show, don't tell is the saying for a reason, and that's why George R.R. Martin's writing has been so wonderful and so good. And why, honestly, his books get quite lengthy at times, because he's showing and he's slowly letting us into the foreshadowing and building up these characters and this world all at the same time. Whereas The Princess and the Queen, it's easier to write, just a history book, but that's the thing, is it essentially is just a history book for the world of A Song of Ice and Fire. It is not told by these characters, it's told by the Archmeister just setting down this history. I made it 26 pages in this novella that I was so excited for in Dangerous Women, and I couldn't go on. I could not go on from there. I was just dying. That was 2013 though, when I actually received Dangerous Women, right? So it's 2013 that I received it, that I read part of that novella. Now that novella is contained in Fire and Blood. And I love this cover. I love a lot about it. We're gonna get there, but I hated the book itself. So Fire and Blood contains essentially, there's a good portion with the Princess and the Queen, or the Blacks and the Greens. That section that novella is contained within this. It's a lengthy novella, but it's definitely not a, what is this, 700-page hardcover? Yeah, 700-page hardcover book. It's in here. But ended up being not till 2018 was I finally able to even read the rest of that novella. As excited as I was back in 2013 to get more Song of Ice and Fire, I had to wait till 2018 to get the audiobook for this book to actually finally read it and reread it and read everything else in this. Now, I was bored out of my mind. I could not get myself. I went back and Shadows for Silence in the Forest of Hell by Brandon Sanderson. Excellent. That was well done in here. I need to read more of those, actually. Fire and Blood is just, it's all tell. It's no show. There's some you get kind of close to, Mushroom. There's a character that's really interesting, that's fun to follow, and some other, characters. But on the whole, you've got Aemon and Draymond and Damon and Saemon, because they all sound the same. And it's so much of these same names. But I have an argument, and I'll get to that when I talk about the show. I don't honestly think it's going to matter in the long run. But this book itself, it's so boringly told. I could not stand it. Even listening on audio and that was really the only way I was able to make it through the book. I could not stand it. Now, obviously, you probably know this by now. This series has been plagued by issues, mostly the issues being George R.R. Martin not being able to finish his books. And again, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. He can take his time or do whatever he needs to do with writing these. I still think there's an inherent kind of promise when you kind of say, hey, and announce this is book one of X amount, and you produce these books, and I do believe he's kind of let the fame and the fortune and everything kind of get to him, not to mention also the pressure. So I get that, and so that's going to help. That's not going to help your mental health. Like, I 100% understand that. But with this series being so plagued, this is my version of A Feast for Crows. I got it in 2006, it was just before, I got this hardback just before the paperback came out. I was convinced that this was the last book in the series and that I was just catching up. I was very wrong. But in 2005, I had read the rest of the series, A Game of Thrones Through a Storm of Swords. Picked this one up thinking this was the end. I don't know why. The internet wasn't great back then. That's all I can think of. And so I was thinking this was the end. But then at the very end of this book, you get this Meanwhile Back at the Wall, and where he explains that he's essentially written this. He was writing A Dance with Dragons, and it just got too big, too much. And he thought, I can either split this down the middle, have it to be continued, or split it by the north and the south, which not 100% followed, but mostly followed. We're told here that while this was the south, we're told, that's why it's Meanwhile Back on the Wall, the north, we're told Tyrion, Jon, Dany, Stannis, and Melisandre, Davos Seaworth, and all the rest of the characters you love or love to hate will be along next year. And then he does say, I devoutly hope, in A Dance with Dragons. Now, as we know, he wrote this 2005 when this book was published. We did not get A Dance with Dragons until 2011. That was not the next year. He definitely learned his lesson about announcing dates and when things would be coming out. For all intents and purposes, it sounded like, from that statement right there, that it was all done, right? That it was just a matter of editing that batch. And maybe it was, and that's what George R. Martin's known for, rewriting things. And again, I think the reason everyone is clamoring so well, because it's so good. And I get that. I even have an argument that Feast for Crows is excellent. It's probably my least favorite in the series up to that point. I still think it's really good and better than most books out there, to be honest. So I bring all that up to go, look, it's been now 4 years since Fire and Blood. It's been, 11 years since A Dance with Dragons. The Winds of Winter, we're finally getting a couple of updates, as frustratingly lacking as they are. But we're getting there. At least we're getting something. I have to say that kind of has added to, probably, I have to admit the hype that I had for this world. I loved, because again, my only experience up to The Princess and the Queen was the Dunk and Egg novellas, which were excellent. They follow Dunk and Egg. You get actually into the character's head, and you go on these adventures and whatnot. Again, now we have a history. I don't read history books for fun, right? That's not what I come to fantasy for. I am not here for history books. I've read plenty of them. But they work for some people, so I get it. I'm not blaming you if you like that. But for me, I don't come to a fantasy world to get just a history. Now, having just reread The Silmarillion, I can say I actually loved that when I first read it, because I was a Lord of the Rings addict and needed anything else I could get. Having just read it again, I was like, oh, this is boring. And so I felt the same thing. It is just a history book. So I get it. Again, I get it because I also, too, have loved a history book for a fantasy world. But I guess me now, I did not like this one. I could not stand it. Now, and this is no spoilers, just so you know. I obviously have not seen House of the Dragon. It doesn't come out until this weekend. Very exciting. I still think, despite everything that I've said and how much I hated Fire and Ice, I think we have a really good shot at House of the Dragon being really good. My focus has mostly been on the history book aspects, the boringness, those types of things. I don't think the show needs, or it matters to the show as much, right? We're going to see these characters. We don't get into their heads anyway. We didn't get into their heads for the original show, seasons 1 through 7, which were good. For Game of Thrones. And so I think we're in for a treat. One, there is, because it's a history book, this is like jam-packed full of stories, and there's a lot of stories. So there's a lot that can be told. So you could go on for seasons just off this one book, as opposed to a lot of books that are told in the show don't tell arena. And again, don't get me wrong, show and tell, like, there's a level of tell that you can do, right? That you need to do, I think, to keep a book flowing. So don't get me wrong on that. It's just when it's all tell and no show, or very little show, that's what drives me nuts. So, but that's what I'm saying, is there's a lot. One of the problems with the show for Game of Thrones was that it lost the material, right? George R.R. Martin's material, once it was away from the books, the D&D were out on their own, right? They were on their own, and that wasn't going to happen, right? They were not going to be able to be as successful, definitely, as they had been in the past by following the books clearly. You've got the master writing and foreshadowing and getting the right things in there. So, but we've got plenty, I think, plenty of material. That's the first thing. First thing that will not do us wrong here. Second, I didn't mention, the stories themselves are interesting, right? As much as I was bored out of my mind, it was kind of like, oh, that's interesting, Let's see, you got literally the queen and the princess. So what is it? Viserys the first, he essentially says, hey, my daughter's going to be the one to inherit my kingdom, to inherit everything. Well, he subsequently marries a Hightower, actually, who then has sons, and usually he's very progressive at the time, but he usually the custom is always, well, the oldest son inherits, and he had always said his oldest daughter, and so that starts the big, huge. You have the Green Council. Again, I'm not going into spoilers here, but you have the Green Council. You have essentially what becomes the Dance with Dragons that just blows everything up because of that, and everyone taking their sides because everyone thought, hey, I've got my shot here. And so there's that. Lots of material, lots of stuff to get into. I do think the stories themselves, what's nice again is you've got TV medium is going to be a lot different than a book. A book, you've got it. I just feel like, again, that show, not telling, getting into the characters' heads and stuff, that's so vital for an entertaining and fun book that this wasn't. But the show itself, it's going to be able to just focus on the stories. And again, I think the stories themselves, like, that doesn't change much. I know I mentioned the names are difficult. I don't think the names, I think at least we're going to just be on the same level as the past show, Game of Thrones, with the names. Nobody knew the names for that anyway, and there are a lot of different names. Yeah, these ones might be Aemon and Naaman and Saemon and Gaiman and Neil Gaiman's in this? What? So, but nobody ever knew. I mean, they knew like Khaleesi and thought that was Daenerys' name, and then named their kids that. So I'm not too concerned as far as the names. Nobody knew them anyway. Anyway, everyone's only going to know them by like white-haired dude. I don't know, just something like they knew the cast of Game of Thrones anyway. So I'm not concerned about the names. What I do think is cool, there's a lot more dragons. You know, Game of Thrones, and they're just beautifully done dragons. Game of Thrones only had Daenerys' dragons, right? And that was it. Those were the last dragons in the whole world. Whereas this is a time before that where, I mean, that's what Game of Thrones is referring to. Like, there used to be all these dragons, and now this is the last. And it's like, this is the time of the dragons. There's dragons, and that's pretty cool. So that's exciting for me. I think we should get lots of dragons. Anyway, let's hope. And I'm sure that's why it's so expensive this season. The dragons, I think, are going to be awesome. Part of this, too, is this is the history that George R.R. Martin has been kind of basing his whole series off of. And I think you've got to have a strong history that you're kind of referring back to make the actual present series good. And frankly, he just doesn't have the time to like go write all this out as a you know, as a showing, as an actual entertaining book. I know I'm giving so much garbage to this, but I just hate it. I really do not like it. But I really think that House of the Dragon will be good for those reasons that I mentioned. So I don't know if you're excited as I am about the show. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you're looking forward to it. I really think, I mean, what, D&D aren't even involved in this one, so that's a good thing. You know, the showrunners for Game of Thrones, which again, they did so well at the beginning when there was source material to follow, and then it just fell apart and it was terrible. Frankly, it ended so poorly on so many levels for me. But I just think right now we're in a good spot. This has lots of potential, lots of great events that, you know, it just in a real feeling fantasy world, and that's the thing. That's what George has done to really just make this so real. It's so petty, and it's all the squabbles and everything, and everyone's vying for power. And I really think we're going to get into a lot of different arenas, or a lot of different areas that we weren't able to explore in the in Game of Thrones arena, because like the Baratheons had kind of, well, you had like Stannis, but he wasn't in his like normal seat of Storm's End, right? So we actually might be able to see Storm's End, and then just other places I think we're going to be able to see. So it's exciting again with lots more dragons. Let's hope. There's one scene in particular that I'm hoping is going to get a really good. I just can't imagine it not. You know, and just because of the fact that, you know, Targaryens are known as the ones that can control the dragons, right? And so I'll just leave it at that. I'm keeping this no spoiler, but there's so many cool scenes, so that's what I'm going is. That's what kept me going, and that's why I was actually able to finish Fire and Blood, because the stories themselves, I did say, look, for a true fan of the series, this is a book for you. It's almost essential reading. You got to read it. I am one, despite this video, how much hate I'm throwing, but it's still just it's exciting to see this get to the screen, and I think it's going to be, again, based. There's all kinds of material to go off of, and I think 4 seasons just in one book. So that is, I guess, one benefit to this, to how this was published and stuff. We still want Winds of Winter. We still want. The Dream of Spring, is that what it is? Anyway, I just wish we could get those, but we'll see. Anyway, let me know how it goes. Let me know your thoughts. And did anyone hate this as much as I did? I just could not stand it. It was so boring. I anyway, I just was like falling asleep even listening to the audiobook. But I really think House of the Dragon will do well. It has at least all kinds of potential to do well, and mostly because it's based in George R.R. Martin's actual stories. So anyway, I know it's a little contradictory. I'm sticking with it. Anyway, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you later. Bye.